with Fannin, Judy, Shedeur and what he was able to show last year, Deshaun and what he's shown in his past, and Dylan and what he was able to show last year as well. The offensive line obviously is something that we're going to be looking to add to, and in addition to develop, the guys that we have here. With Whippler, possibly Joel. I'm not sure, certainly going to come up as well, but we're allowing him some time to kind of figure that out. But there's a lot of pieces here to be excited about. It kind of goes on what I said about the quarterback room. I mean, you don't take a job unless you're excited about it.
Right now, something fascinating is unfolding behind the scenes inside the building of the Cleveland Browns. And if you truly pay attention to what the new coaching staff said when they stepped up to the podium, you start to notice something that most people almost missed. Suddenly, the message becomes crystal clear. The quarterback situation in Cleveland has quietly shifted in a way that could change everything. For weeks, the conversation revolved around competition, multiple options in the room, and the idea of patience and long-term development. But the moment the coaches finally spoke publicly, the tone felt noticeably different. Buried inside those careful answers and polite wording was a signal that sharp-eared fans instantly caught. The opportunity for Dylan Gabriel might already be shrinking. Meanwhile, the path for Shedeur Sanders could be opening wider than almost anyone predicted. For a long time, the storyline around Cleveland's quarterback room sounded like a perfectly balanced showdown. Analysts kept repeating that the team had several legitimate options to choose from. Some believed experience would ultimately carry the most weight. Others assumed the coaching staff would simply lean toward whoever already understood the system best. But once you slow down and really analyze the recent remarks coming from inside the organization, the entire narrative begins to shift. Yes, the coaches did mention multiple quarterbacks. However, the way they talked about each one clearly didn't carry the same energy. The tone noticeably shifted depending on which name entered the conversation. When Shedeur Sanders was mentioned, the focus sharpened and the delivery felt serious, almost like they were outlining the centerpiece of their future plan. When Dylan Gabriel came up, the language felt softer and more polite, almost like someone being acknowledged out of courtesy rather than genuine expectation. And this is exactly why fans and analysts immediately started reading between the lines. You won't believe how obvious the signals start to look once you really listen closely.
Can set the world on fire. One picture. Coach Monken showed a picture of him and Shedeur with the horse trophy, the horse statue had. Did you see this, Chris?
I sure did.
Kalshi lit up the predictions market. Odds via Kalshi, updated every hour. Browns 26 starting quarterback. Shedeur is 44% to start. Deshaun is 35% to start. Dylan Gabriel is 12% to start.
No chance. No chance, buddy.
Mac Jones is 6% to start. Anthony Richardson, 5%. Kyler Murray.
In professional football, coaches almost never come right out and reveal depth chart decisions. Instead, they communicate through subtle hints. They highlight effort and work ethic. They bring up development and growth. They talk about opportunity. But if you really listen closely, the structure of their answers reveals the real story. And this time, the structure made something feel undeniable. The Cleveland Browns may already have a clear idea of who they want guiding that offense moving forward. And the name that keeps rising to the top of that conversation is Shedeur Sanders. Now take a step back and think about how surprising this shift really is. Not long ago, the quarterback debate in Cleveland looked completely different. There was still real uncertainty about how the team would approach the position going forward. Some believed the organization might slowly cycle players in to evaluate everyone carefully. Others thought the coaching staff would rely on safer, more stable options while the roster settled into place. But suddenly, the entire conversation feels far more decisive. The body language from the coaching staff looked confident when discussing Sanders. Comments coming from insiders sounded noticeably optimistic. Even media voices who closely follow the team started repeating the same message. The momentum seems to be moving in one very clear direction. Meanwhile, the situation surrounding Dylan Gabriel appears much more complicated. Gabriel is talented, and no one inside the organization has publicly questioned his ability. But football is about more than talent alone. Timing matters, fit matters, coaching philosophy matters. When a new staff arrives in a building, they often begin reshaping the roster around the quarterback they believe fits their offensive system best. And sometimes that means certain players unexpectedly find themselves drifting outside the long-term vision. That does not mean they failed. It simply means the plan inside the building has shifted. And right now, that plan seems to be aligning more and more with Shedeur Sanders. Coaches appear fascinated by his calm presence, his decision-making, and the way he handles pressure in big moments. Teammates have quietly mentioned the confidence he brings to the huddle. Observers have noticed how comfortable he looks commanding the offense during practice sessions. These are exactly the kinds of details organizations study when deciding who should lead a team. Because playing quarterback in the National Football League is not just about throwing deep passes down the field. It is about leadership, composure, and controlling the rhythm of an entire offense. That is why the recent comments from Cleveland's coaching staff sparked so much conversation across the football world. People could almost hear the shift happening in real time. The respectful language toward Dylan Gabriel sounded like appreciation for a player still battling for his role. But the energy surrounding Shedeur Sanders sounded completely different. It sounded like belief. And belief from a coaching staff can change everything in the NFL. Because once a team truly believes a certain quarterback represents the future, the entire structure of the roster begins shifting in that direction.
Right? But today is a very important episode right now. If you're in the building, hit that like button. If you're in the building, hit that share button. If you're in the building, make sure you comment. And this thing needs to go out because I'm going to give you a definitive reason as to why this thing happens, right? And I'm going to let you know it has more to do, not necessarily with what the quarterback names are. I'm going to give you down to the root of the problem. And if you have always wanted to know what's going on with the Cleveland Browns fan base, why does the local media react certain ways? Why does it always seem like there's this slant to it? I'm going to give it to you today. So you don't have to worry about it no more because I think I'm the perfect person to do it. I've been in this game since, I grew up in the area. I've been a Browns fan, and that's one of the things I can say that a lot of people can't. I've been a Browns fan watching this team since I was young. I've been in the industry. I was one of the forefathers of the internet movement when it comes to making blogs on YouTube. I've done it. I've worked for the Browns radio network. I've done it at all different levels.
So even though nothing has been officially confirmed yet, the signals coming out of the Cleveland Browns are getting harder and harder to ignore. The quarterback debate that once looked completely open now feels like it is gradually narrowing toward a single name. Fans are starting to pick up on it. Analysts are talking about it across every show and podcast, and even the coaching staff's own words are quietly helping shape the narrative. The biggest question now is no longer whether Shedeur Sanders will receive an opportunity. The real question is whether the Cleveland Browns might be preparing to give him control of the offense far sooner than anyone expected. The more this situation develops inside the Cleveland Browns building, the more it begins to look like the road is tightening for Dylan Gabriel. Not long ago, his name was still firmly part of the quarterback conversation in Cleveland. Fans were actively debating whether he could carve out a larger role. Analysts were wondering if he might push his way into real playing time, and some media voices even believed he could shock everyone if the right opportunity appeared. But the tone surrounding Gabriel has changed rapidly, and in the National Football League, when that type of shift happens, it usually signals that something important has already changed behind the scenes. Quarterback competitions in professional football rarely disappear overnight without a reason. Most of the time, they slowly fade because the coaching staff begins leaning toward a different direction. When a new coaching group enters a building, they start evaluating everything from the ground up. They dive into film study, they examine how each quarterback reads the field and processes pressure, and they ask one key question: which player gives this offense the best chance to grow? Once that internal decision starts forming, the ripple effects begin showing up everywhere, in interviews, in practice reps, and even in the way coaches publicly describe each player. That is exactly what seems to be unfolding right now with Dylan Gabriel. No one inside Cleveland is openly criticizing him. In fact, whenever his name is mentioned, the coaches still speak about him with clear respect. That alone tells you Gabriel is viewed as a true professional and someone who works hard. But respect and opportunity are two completely different currencies in the NFL. When a coaching staff genuinely believes a quarterback is part of their future, the language becomes much stronger. They talk about leadership qualities. They emphasize upside and long-term potential. They describe that player as someone capable of pushing the entire offense forward. Those kinds of phrases create momentum, and right now, those phrases are appearing far more often when the conversation turns toward Shedeur Sanders. That subtle difference in tone is exactly why analysts immediately raised eyebrows after the most recent press conference. When the coaches talked about the quarterback room, Gabriel's name sounded almost like a side note in the larger discussion. It felt more like acknowledging his presence than declaring he is battling for the top spot. Meanwhile, the spotlight kept drifting back to Sanders and what he could potentially bring to the offense. To casual viewers, that contrast might seem small, but inside NFL circles, those details speak volumes. There is also the reality of how coaching staffs shape their offensive identity. Every offensive system moves with its own rhythm. Some coaches prefer quarterbacks who play aggressively and attack defenses without hesitation. Others want someone calm, patient, and methodical when reading the field and controlling the game. If the coaching staff believes Shedeur Sanders naturally fits their vision, then the entire evaluation process will slowly begin tilting in his direction.
I think that I've come to a conclusion as to why we are the way we are. And this is going right. It says, where will Kyler Murray land? The Minnesota Vikings. It's a win now and what Kyler Murray wants to be looking at, right? So let's talk about this. Before we can have this type of conversation, before we get to this, there are a couple of things that we're gonna put out that need to really focus on why it is sometimes, unless you have these three statements or these three core tenets, you are never going to be able to have an honest conversation about quarterback in the city of Cleveland. These three things are things that you must, at least at some level, acknowledge and or examine before you can even have a credible conversation with anybody about quarterbacks. If one of these three things are true, it's going to be increasingly hard for you to have a conversation about quarterbacks. It's almost like trying to convince somebody that the world is round. At some point, you don't argue with those folks. It's like saying, it's almost like saying, how do you prove something to somebody who is willfully ignorant? I'm not going to be arguing every day with people about whether the earth is round or flat, because you need a certain basis of reality for you to even be competent. So let's get to this. These are three things that you must consider. And there's a lot of people who don't consider these things when it comes to having an honest conversation about the quarterback before we get to any of this.
Once that shift begins, it becomes incredibly hard for another quarterback in the room to stop it. For Dylan Gabriel, that reality creates a very difficult position. He entered this situation believing he could compete and prove he was capable of leading the offense. That is the mindset every quarterback must carry when stepping into a professional locker room. But competition in the National Football League is not always perfectly fair or balanced. Sometimes timing works against a player. Sometimes a coaching staff simply connects more naturally with another quarterback's style. And sometimes an organization begins picturing its future with someone else behind center. When that happens, even talented players can suddenly find themselves climbing a hill that gets steeper every single week. That does not mean Gabriel's career is over or that his talent has vanished. The NFL is filled with stories where quarterbacks switch teams and suddenly flourish in a better situation. Different offensive systems highlight different strengths. A player who struggles to gain opportunity in one building might walk into another locker room and immediately thrive. But inside the Cleveland Browns facility right now, the momentum appears to be drifting away from Gabriel and toward another path. And that path keeps circling back to Shedeur Sanders. Every time the coaches speak publicly, every time analysts break down the situation, the same pattern keeps emerging. Sanders is being talked about as someone who could shape the offense moving forward. His confidence, decision-making, and composure continue to stand out whenever the team's future is discussed. When those traits start dominating the narrative inside a quarterback room, it usually signals that an organization may be quietly preparing for a transition. So while nothing official has been announced yet, the environment around the Browns' quarterback competition feels very different from just a few weeks ago. Dylan Gabriel still carries respect inside the building, but respect alone does not secure playing time in the NFL. Opportunity follows belief, and belief inside Cleveland appears to be growing stronger around Shedeur Sanders with each passing day. For a long time, the conversation around Sanders felt confusing to many people watching the situation unfold in Cleveland. Here was a quarterback showing confidence, composure, and the ability to command an offense. Yet the discussion about his role often sounded uncertain and unresolved. Fans kept repeating the same question again and again. When will he finally receive a true opportunity to prove himself? Because in the NFL, talent by itself guarantees nothing. Players still need that moment when the organization looks at them and says, "This is your chance. Go lead the team." And now, for the first time in a long while, it feels like that moment might finally be arriving. When the Browns coaching staff recently spoke about their quarterback room, the way they described Shedeur Sanders sounded noticeably different than before. There was more certainty in their tone and more attention placed on what he could bring to the offense. Instead of describing him as just another option in the room, the conversation began framing him as someone who could truly influence the direction of the team moving forward. That type of language rarely appears by accident during NFL press conferences. Quarterbacks carry a unique level of importance inside any organization. Every pass they throw is evaluated. Every practice repetition is examined closely. Coaches study how quickly they process defensive schemes, how clearly they communicate with teammates, and how they react when things start going wrong. Those small moments slowly build a reputation within the building. And for Shedeur Sanders, many of those internal impressions seem to be trending in a very positive direction. People around the team have quietly pointed out how calm he looks when operating the offense. They've noticed how comfortable he appears while scanning the field. They've also mentioned how naturally he steps into leadership moments during team activities. That type of composure is something coaches value more than almost anything else. The NFL is a fast, chaotic environment where quarterbacks deal with pressure from every possible angle. Defensive schemes evolve every week. Pass rushers collapse the pocket within seconds. Crowd noise can make communication nearly impossible. In those intense moments, teams want a quarterback who stays calm and continues making smart decisions.
Now, let me see. Premise one, Stefanski was the main issue. There are a lot of people in the industry who got their information from Kevin Stefanski, got all of their inside information from Kevin Stefanski. He gave them what they wanted to hear, what they were doing, and he'd been here for 6 years. If you can't even come to the grips and conclusion that Kevin Stefanski, the Cleveland Browns, and ownership felt that Kevin Stefanski was the main issue, you'll never be able to have an honest conversation about quarterback, because you'll always pivot to the fact that the quarterback was the issue. You'll say Andrew Berry was the issue, or it was the quarterback was the issue, or the talent was the issue. If you don't come to the conclusion or even acknowledge that Kevin Stefanski could have been the main problem with this team, you'll never have an honest conversation about quarterback. You'll always continue to do what people do. Believe because you just dialed in on quarterback, then you're never going to be able to have an honest conversation about quarterbacks, period. Because you have an out-of-date, unrealistic approach about the game of football in general. not quarterback. You don't understand the minutia of the other things that work in concert to having a good quarterback. If a person is arguing with you about why the world is flat, but they only have a third grade education when it comes to geography or geometry or any sort of earth sciences, good luck.
When coaches start believing a quarterback has that level of mental control, their confidence in him can rise very quickly. And right now, that kind of belief appears to be forming around Shedeur Sanders within the Cleveland Browns organization. Another factor fueling this growing momentum is the way Sanders presents himself publicly. Quarterbacks are not judged only by what happens during games or practices. They are also expected to represent the team in interviews, locker room conversations, and media appearances. A player who projects confidence while staying composed can rapidly earn respect from teammates and coaches. Sanders has frequently been described as someone who understands that responsibility. He communicates clearly, shows strong belief in his preparation, and approaches the position with the mindset of a true leader. That kind of presence carries serious weight inside a professional locker room. At the same time, the shift towards Sanders does not mean the journey has been easy. The path to becoming a starting quarterback in the National Football League is almost never smooth. Every player entering the league faces questions about readiness, development, and the ability to adjust to the speed of professional defenses. Sanders has faced those same questions. Critics have debated how his transition to the professional level would unfold. Analysts have dissected every detail of his playing style, and fans have constantly argued about how quickly he should be given control of an offense. That level of pressure overwhelms many young quarterbacks, but Sanders has continued pushing forward through it, and that persistence may finally be starting to show results. When an organization watches a quarterback keep grinding, keep improving, and keep carrying himself with confidence despite outside noise, it sends a powerful message. Coaches notice it, teammates notice it. The belief that a player can handle the spotlight grows stronger every time he proves he can stay focused under scrutiny. Sanders now seems to be reaching the stage where people inside the building are beginning to trust him with greater responsibility. This is exactly why the quarterback discussion in Cleveland suddenly feels far more exciting than it did just weeks ago. Instead of a confusing rotation of names and possibilities, the narrative is beginning to center on one player who might lead the offense into the future. The Browns have spent years searching for real stability at the quarterback position, and whenever a team senses it may have finally found the right leader, the entire energy inside the organization starts shifting. Coaches begin designing plans around that player. Teammates rally behind that player. Fans start imagining what the team could look like with that quarterback directing the offense. So while nothing has been officially finalized yet, the signals surrounding Shedeur Sanders keep growing stronger. The language coming from coaches is evolving, the excitement from observers continues building, and the opportunity that once seemed distant now feels closer than ever. What makes this situation even more intriguing is that it is not just fans noticing the shift inside the Cleveland Browns building. Analysts, insiders, and longtime observers of the organization have also begun connecting the dots. When people who follow a team every single day begin repeating the same message, it usually means the signals coming from inside the franchise are becoming too loud to ignore. And right now, many of those voices are pointing in the same direction, towards Shedeur Sanders. One of the most interesting reactions came from well-known Cleveland Browns analyst Garrett Bush, often called G-Bush by fans who closely follow Cleveland sports. When he talked about the quarterback situation, his tone sounded extremely confident about where things might be heading. Instead of describing the position as a wide-open competition, he spoke as if the momentum was clearly shifting toward Sanders. That kind of commentary immediately grabbed attention because analysts who cover teams closely often hear small details from practices, team meetings, and internal discussions that never fully reach the public. When someone like Garrett Bush sounds convinced about the direction of a quarterback room, people start listening very carefully. At the same time, another Cleveland media personality, Tony Rizzo, known to fans simply as Riz, added even more fuel to the conversation. While discussing the Browns' quarterback situation, he made a remark that quickly spread through fan communities. When the topic of Dylan Gabriel surfaced, Rizzo did not sound very optimistic about his chances of becoming the starter. Instead, the comment felt blunt and almost definitive. The message many listeners took away was simple: Gabriel might no longer be part of the primary plan moving forward. That reaction from local media matters because analysts who spend years around a franchise often understand how teams communicate indirectly. Coaches rarely step in front of a microphone and reveal their full strategy months in advance. Instead, the hints appear slowly over time. Analysts then piece those hints together with what they hear around the organization. When several of those voices begin arriving at similar conclusions, it usually means the internal direction is becoming clearer behind the scenes. Another reason this conversation is gaining so much traction is the emotional investment Browns fans have in finally stabilizing the quarterback position. For years, the franchise has been searching for a consistent leader under center. Every offseason seemed to bring another debate, another competition, another attempt to solve the most important position in football. So when a player like Shedeur Sanders begins emerging as a possible long-term solution, the excitement inside the fan base grows very quickly. Supporters of the team are eager to believe that the long search may finally be approaching a turn point. The media conversations surrounding Cleveland are reflecting that same energy. Shows discussing the Browns are suddenly spending more time breaking down Sanders' potential and far less time debating multiple quarterbacks in the room. When that shift happens in sports coverage, it usually signals that the storyline itself is evolving. The focus naturally moves towards the player who appears most likely to shape the future. And right now, that spotlight is slowly moving towards Shedeur Sanders. Meanwhile, the discussion surrounding Dylan Gabriel continues fading further into the background. Once again, this shift is not coming from criticism of his work ethic or professionalism. Analysts still recognize the talent and effort that Dylan Gabriel brings every time he steps on the field. But in the fast-moving world of the National Football League, narratives can flip almost overnight. Once another quarterback starts building momentum inside an organization, the conversation around everyone else naturally begins to shrink. Opportunity in this league is often tied to timing, and right now, that timing seems to be working in favor of Shedeur Sanders with each passing week. That's exactly why reactions from analysts like Garrett and Tony Rizzo have become such a major talking point. They are not simply throwing out opinions, they are echoing the direction they believe the Cleveland Browns organization may be leaning towards. When local voices start sounding confident about a quarterback emerging as the future, fans immediately sense that something important might be developing behind the scenes. It sparks anticipation, speculation, and that growing feeling that the team could soon reveal its real plan. So now the conversation around Cleveland's quarterback room has moved far beyond coaching press conferences. It has spread across sports shows, fan forums, and non-stop online debates. Everywhere you look, the same question keeps popping up. Are the Browns preparing to move forward with Shedeur Sanders as the centerpiece of the offense? When you step back and examine everything that has been said, everything that has been hinted at, and everything analysts are now piecing together, the quarterback picture around Cleveland suddenly looks far clearer than it once did. What once felt like a wide-open competition now seems to be slowly narrowing towards a single direction. The comments from the coaching staff, the reactions from insiders, and the rising confidence from analysts all appear to point towards the same possibility. The Browns may finally be preparing to move ahead with Shedeur Sanders as the quarterback who could shape the franchise's next chapter. For Cleveland fans, that possibility carries serious weight. The team has spent years searching for stability at the most important position in football. Season after season, the quarterback conversation kept resetting. New names arrived, expectations built, and then the search started all over again. That cycle can slowly drain the momentum from any organization. So when a young quarterback begins displaying the traits of a potential leader, composure, confidence, and the ability to command an offense, the entire franchise starts paying close attention. Sanders now finds himself right at the center of that opportunity. The signals coming from inside the organization suggest the coaching staff sees something special in his development. His calm presence in the pocket, his ability to read defenses, and the leadership he brings into the locker room are exactly the qualities teams look for in a long-term quarterback. When a player starts building that level of belief inside the building, the next step usually becomes inevitable. Eventually, the team has to give him the opportunity to prove it on the field. At the same time, the story of Dylan Gabriel reminds everyone how quickly things can change in professional football. One moment, a player is fully part of the conversation, and the next, the spotlight begins drifting somewhere else. That's the reality of competition at the highest level of the sport. Talent alone is not always enough. Timing, opportunity, and the vision of the coaching staff all play massive roles in determining who rises and who ends up moving down a different path. Right now, the energy surrounding Cleveland suggests a new era might quietly be taking shape. Nothing official has been announced yet, but the momentum around Shedeur